Hola, Cules. We are back with another episode of Fullback, which is our podcast, which mostly we run on Spotify and iTunes, but now we are putting this on YouTube as well, so you can watch it anywhere. And we have an old guest back with us, Dan, from the Barcelona Podcast. He was so good last time, and so many of you watched him and wanted him back that we went back and requested could he come back again to the show? And he was very kind. And thank you, Dan, for being so kind.
Dev, it's early in the morning here in the East Coast of the US, 7 a.m. But for those who work 9 to 5 here in the US, which is most people, 7 a.m. is not a crazy time. But because I work in sports and it's my life, 7 a.m. is like an unknown time. But it's also, for once, I finally am in the news cycle.
It's very difficult to catch up on old things that are happening. But that's what we're going to try here today. Yeah. So we'll do our best and see what has happened in the last week. So, Dev, let's kick this off.
The elephant in the room about Monaco is Ter Stegen. And there's a lot of discussion around whether Ter Stegen is right or Ter Stegen is wrong. And should Barca have moved on from him? And is he the cause of all our problems and what have you? This is our fan base after all. So I would love to talk to you, gentlemen, and get your viewpoints. I felt Monaco really knew and had our number and made us run around. And even without Ter Stegen, we would have struggled in that game. That's what I felt. Maybe wrong, but that was one. And then obviously, really the culprit that we are making him out to be. So with that, I'll pass it on to you, Dan. You're the guest, and then Dom will hear from you.
I'm going to take the easier part and give Dom the harder part, I think, here. Just to speak about Monaco, in the first 10 minutes, I think what we did notice was that there was a difference in the first two matches without Dani Olmo this season, and then when Dani Olmo showed up and what that looked like. I know we are going to talk about Dani Olmo later, but to your point, Deb, I do tentatively agree that I don't think it would have been a walk in the park without Dani Olmo. I think I was a little surprised, honestly, because of the players on the bench and even the youth players on the bench that we could have seen and trusted. Not to say that coach prepares for an early red card, and the stat was that this was the earliest red card for a Barcelona player in Champions League history, and it was the fifth quickest red card for any Barcelona player in recent history, I think starting in like 1974 and possibly beyond that, since they started that record. So this was a red card that happened so quickly that you do not actually prepare for it as a manager. And I know that I had a counter argument that my listeners gave me that, okay, but a coach has to be prepared in all instances, but not really. So I think the idea, having seen the pregame or the preseason match against Monaco and then comparing that to today, I think the idea was Hansi Flick respected the Champions League. I know people said that the high line was a risk and all those things, but by starting Eric Garcia, he respected the fact that Monaco was going to press. And instead of starting Ferran Torres and Rafinha as the 10, with Pedri and Casado as the double pivot, that was the other idea. So I was actually surprised not to see that lineup, which was the one that we saw prior to Dani Olmo arriving and jumping right into the starting lineup. So that was my little surprise at the start of the game. But then to your point, I think, not to say the glass half full version of this is from this game, is that just like the PSG game, the last time Barcelona had this bad luck in the Champions League, the last time we saw some mistakes, I do throw this game out. And I'm not worried at all about the Champions League campaign for Barcelona so far, because yes, they start with a loss, which is absolutely in what is a new version of a Champions League. I guess to say that it's more about we're going to learn how much of a problem this is, how starting with a loss in this new phase of the Champions League, because it's still so unknown. Yes, there's two extra matches against two extra teams, but it's hard to know just how difficult it'll be and how much of an uphill battle it might be to come back. We might learn in 7 match days in the Champions League that this starting with a loss doesn't matter, right? And so this could all be very quickly forgotten because, as I said, to analyze this game against Monaco, I found it hard to do because, again, with such a quick red card, not to say who cares, there's really no structural issues about Barcelona to understand 90 minutes without one of your players. Yeah, as far as trying to break it down, it doesn't really matter to me because, yeah, I mean, Ter Stegen and the combination of Ter Stegen plus Eric Garcia, but people started going the Eric Garcia thing, and I'm going to throw it to Dom to say that for me, it was 92% to 8% Ter Stegen to Eric Garcia. Like, it's one path dooms you, and now we're having a dialogue about Ter Stegen. But that's with goalkeepers, you get to make one mistake, and then you're in the doghouse. And for Ter Stegen, it is consistently in the Champions League been one big mistake, and quite a few times. And I think that is where the dialogue for him begins. So Dom, sorry, I took the easy stuff. Now you get the hard stuff.
No, that's absolutely fine then. But yeah, I think it is. The blame is more on Ter Stegen. There's no escaping that fact because he did have other options. He had safer options. But on our live stream, Dev, we talked about this actually being a play that's pre-rehearsed, that's pre-planned on the training pitch, where you do have the pivot dropping and then you use the third man to access the fullback much easier and in much more space. Because if you go centrally, you drag the markers towards that area and free up the fullback area, which is then your way of progression. And I feel like Ter Stegen might have been a bit too hesitant to go down that route. And then he remembered, okay, I have to do this. This is the instruction from the coach. So I have to go this way. And then the pass was too late. And then, of course, Eric doesn't even get to it. And the whole issue happens. So, yes, it is kind of Ter Stegen's fault, but he was following orders where he had to use his kind of free will a bit more, I would say. So, yes, I'm still leaning towards Ter Stegen having to think for himself and decide, okay, this is actually an instance where I have to deviate from the structure, deviate from the pre-planned actions and do something that's different. That's maybe improvising in that specific moment. That's how I see this whole situation. But it's not easy, and especially if Ter Stegen's ball playing is decreasing, it's becoming more of an issue. We talked about this a lot, Dev, as well on the live stream. Then we have a huge problem because Ter Stegen, he's a crucial part of the team precisely because of that ball playing. Flick puts so much emphasis on that ball playing, on the progression from the back, on the verticality from the back, and the efficiency from the back. So if he loses that, and then he also has brain farts when it comes to defending and shot stopping, then we have a serious problem. And all of a sudden, Barca don't have to plan for a new striker, for a new left winger, for a new midfielder. They need to plan for a new goalkeeper as well, because there is that competition thing as well. Whereas before, when you saw arguably the best of Ter Stegen was alongside Bravo, when he had that competition, when he had that someone who was a steady presence in La Liga, and then Ter Stegen would get the Champions League games, that kind of put a fire under his feet, and he was maybe performing much better because of that reason. But whereas now, whatever happens, he's the undisputed starter. So there's a discussion to be had maybe around that issue as well. But Barca being broke and Barca being who they are, it's going to be difficult to fit in a name that can come in and actually be within the financial structure that we have at the moment. So yeah, that's how I see this topic. But you know what, guys, there was a positive from that game as well, which was Ansu Fati, and that was his big return. And yes, the game state was not really ideal for him because, of course, you put Fati into a situation where you are a man down. That means he has to run a bit more. Also facing a team that's highly physical. Again, not playing to the current Ansu Fati profile. So what did you make of that? And how do you see Fati's immediate future in this Barca roster?
Yeah, I just want to add just two things to the Ter Stegen point that you were saying. That one, I do think that in was it the 2019 season, and then when Barcelona won the Liga 2 years ago, or not, the season before last, I thought he really was excellent. And I think with Ter Stegen, the hard thing I have with discourse is that one, if you were not a goalkeeper, which I was not, right, our understanding of goalkeepers and their jobs is just much more difficult. So it's like goalkeeper's at a position where I just want to rely on an expert. And then part two of that is very much like other players that get complained about, particularly like Balde is another example that kind of falls in this camp, that if you're only watching Barcelona and you're watching your team, then there are certain positions and players that get a little more criticized because of what they can't do. And so for Ter Stegen, the only defense I do make of him sometimes is that if you do watch enough other football, you'll find that, yes, other goalkeepers have great matches as well. But over the course of a season, goalkeepers do make mistakes, especially with the ball at their feet. And I think it is difficult unless you're watching 90 minutes of another team. You don't fully understand just how important Ter Stegen's feet are, which again, his job is as a goalkeeper is to stop shots. And if he's not stopping shots, and to your point, Dom, if he's making mistakes, big mistakes in the Champions League with the ball at his feet, then yes, that is where the discourse comes in, and the criticism is fully merited for Ter Stegen. Now, in the case of Ansu Fati, it's tough because, yeah, he came in the 88th minute in a game dynamic that didn't really suit him, to your point at all. I'm not sure if Hansi Flick even answered the question. He was very coy in the pre-game presser the day before about where he was going to position Ansu Fati. And we did heard rumblings that it might be as like a number 9, but then for him to come in on the left wing, answered some questions that we didn't know we had, right? Like the idea that he would be at number 9 isn't what Hansi Flick went with. But I also think with only, 9 total minutes because of stoppage time to play with, or less than that, 7 minutes? Because it was a +6. So with 7 total minutes actually get a run out. For me, it was very much what Ansu Fati has been recently, and it's a very ceremonial. Okay, he's back on the field. Great. Stay healthy. Nice to see you out there. What can you do, buddy? He had that one ball over the top that was just too far, one heavy touch. Again, that's nothing to, I'm not going to try to nitpick it, the one moment he could have had in the game or whatever that. He had many moments in the game, and he's been excellent to start this year. And it wasn't Barcelona's game for a number of players. But for Ansu Fati, yeah, it was nice to see him back. But now we'll see with Ferran Torres suspended, when looking at the first team options now on the bench, assuming Casado is ready to go, which it seems like he and Pedri were in the gym this morning to just get a run out. Not get a run out in actual training and just get in the gym and recuperate for Villarreal. But it does seem that if it's the same bench and the same players are officially fit, because I don't see anybody else, you have Pau Victor, Pablo Torre as the two options who've been playing. And Hansi Flick, it seems to be pretty apparent where he sees them in the depth chart, which is totally fair. It's you or Pau Victor. So if the game dynamic goes in a certain way and you want to put Rafinha as the 10, because you also now, Eric Garcia will be available for the Liga, which is good. And he has clearly going to have some energy left after only playing 10 minutes against Monaco. But yeah, I think Ansu Fati against Villarreal, especially with Villarreal and the way they play and Marcelino, that game could get a little up and down. So I think if Ansu does feature for Villarreal, which I expect him to feature more than 20 minutes, he's going to have some chances. There's going to be some moments here. So I think we might be able to say a lot more after Villarreal than we could against Monaco.
I think it's good that he got a run out and people got to see him. It will be interesting to see where he comes in. If it's the 9, I guess that's the only place that there is, or as a replacement for Olmo, but he can't do what an Olmo does, so that's not going to happen. Given that and the way we play, Fati and Lewandowski, how they combine with each other, they're not like similar players from that perspective. So it will be interesting. The big question that Danny raised is right. Who starts? Then there aren't that many number of players that are out there. So somebody's going to take a punt and go with somebody. By the time Monaco ended, players really look tired. So in the last 2 days that they have, whatever recovery that they do, it is going to be up and down, as Dan pointed out. And even if Fati comes in, whether he comes in the 70th minute or he comes in a little bit earlier or what have you, or whether he starts and then Flick takes him off, time will tell. The question, though, that I have is there a future that he has in this Barca side going forward? And for safeguarding that future, if tomorrow's match was a rehearsal, what are the few things that you guys would expect him to be focused on? Yes, obviously he can score a goal or what have you, but realistically speaking, so that the dream of Ansu keeps staying on.
I think for Ansu playing under Xavi to playing under Hansi Flick, I'm oversimplifying the tactics here, but I think that the player that Ansu Fati was when he was 16 might have supported Xavi's system. He had a little more 1v1 ability, but this post-injury Ansu Fati, he's not that 1v1 winger that would have succeeded under Xavi. Now, his ability to come inside, we saw it in slight moments for Brighton, but the reason why I defend Xavi, Ansu Fati's time at Brighton was that they had a lot of depth at his position in particular. If he was going to tuck in, even as the left wing, they had left wingers to do that job. But in the case of Hansi Flick's system, having him come inside quite a bit, the way that Ferran Torres did even in those first 2 matches of the season, and if he can, that being if Ansu Fati can do the things that we know he can still do, and if he can be light on the ball and be good in short spaces, and then find those little areas and pockets to shoot, which, because as I always defend Ansu for this reason, his finishing ability is instinctual in ways that not many players are. And that is why I will never sell my stock on Ansu Fati. That's why I'm always on Ansu Fati Island. And I do think that even with all those injuries, he is not the player that he was when Barcelona first had him debut. And he has now had to adapt and be different. But I still believe in the idea of Ansu Fati because of his just innate finishing ability. And under Hansi Flick, if he's able to find that finishing ability in the spaces that are afforded in that system, even against Monaco. Now, Rafinha had a lot of his opportunities from his legs, but he had those 1 or 2 opportunities that would have come in theory in positions that Ansu might find against Villarreal in those 20 to 25 minutes that I expect him to get still recovering from his injuries and still coming back in the fold. So I think if you're Ansu, it's how does he do when he's going to drop in? But the one question I do have with that is that then are you taking Rafinha out for Ansu in this game against Villarreal? Or is it Ansu coming in for Lewandowski? Because that's two very different things. I think against a Villarreal who A, press really well, and B, are more willing to extend the field a bit. Their tempo has been pretty high. So I understand against Monaco, when you're down a man, you put him on the wing. And I do expect to see him on the wing quite a bit, especially against low blocks. But against a team like Villarreal, who's going to be playing in a higher press and playing in a medium block, I would like to see him come in as that number 9 that is dropping in, the way we are seeing Ferran Torres, and having Rafinha continue to run into the half spaces and continue to be a menace on the wings and get in behind Villarreal. Because there is weaknesses against Villarreal in behind, but that's not who Ansu is supposed to be, right? So I think I'm trying to be optimistic still until he proves me wrong or whatever happens, that there is a role and a way for Ansu to succeed in Hansi Flick's system that I wasn't totally sold on him succeeding under Xavi.
May that happen, because we're all rooting for Ansu, and you know that we all, like anybody who's a Barcelona fan, would love that kid to be successful, and may it happen. So let's switch gears into another topic that has been boiling under Flick and has had a lot of media coverage, and that is of physicality. So the whole media story is around that suddenly Barca is very physical, and that was not the case under Xavi. So Flick came in 6 weeks, they made us into whatever, like absolute automation, and now we're all good. And I think it's oversimplifying the matter. I'll obviously pass it on to you gentlemen first, but what I saw yesterday against Monaco, 10 people, they ran ragged, absolutely ragged. And the physicality affected us. And this problem will be there in Europe, even with Flick, with other teams. We'll face Bayern, we'll face Dortmund, we'll face other teams, and this will not go away, even with 11 people. We will run ragged. So this whole concept that suddenly overnight, over 6 weeks of Flick coming in, we became amazingly physically competent players. I think it's a bit of an oversell per se. Surely there are some changes in the way the team is being trained and coached, but to look at it so black and white, Xavi was absolutely horrible, and then Flick is amazing, and then overnight things happen. I think it's a bit out of context that the media is taking it in.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to say. It's difficult to say if Flick can actually make such a huge change in such a short period of time. And of course, at Barca, there's no denying that there's less focus on the physical aspect. Maybe there is in training. When I was preparing my book on Lionel Messi, that was a couple of years ago, when I spoke to people who were insiders of the club, they did confirm that theory. Okay, yes, some coaches, they don't really prep that much in that sense, right? They focus more on the rondos and all the stuff that you do hear about in the media. So I think with Flick coming in, there is an aspect of physicality that has improved, at least in the preparation for games, and that will continue to be the case. But it's also mostly related to the off-the-ball structure and how we press and how we actually defend. And this is also where, when I look at Flick's overall team, this is where I see the most flaws, actually. Not big issues as of yet, because those have not been exploited as of yet, but there is room for improvement in those areas. Because if Barca can live and die by the counter press, right? Which is often also, it's founded on the physicality a little bit, right? It is the structure, of course, but it's also the physicality and the timing and the running and recognizing when to run and how to run. Of course, there is a lot of that as well. But Barca have been put against Monaco, even when there was 11 versus 11, there was so many situations where Barca were actually outnumbered just purely because of the system that was in place for that press to be able to work. So we have fullbacks actually marking two players at the same time. And even if you are someone very physical, someone who can run a lot, someone who can cover all of ground, you will suffer in that instance if your timing is not immaculate and your reading of the game is not immaculate. So these things, they do get improved upon by physicality itself. But if the system itself is not in place to mitigate those issues and prevent those issues, no matter which players you have and how physically fit they are, they will probably struggle in those situations. So I'm still in the camp where it is the system that can mask those issues and the lack of that player, but that physical player cannot mask the flaws of the system, right? So that's my way of looking at the situation. Yes, the physicality may be better or worse, we can't really say, but the system is what will make or break this pressing structure, this defensive unit that we have as a team.
Dom, I really agree with you, honestly, as we did on my show a few weeks ago. I agree with Dom too much. But yeah, I agree with Dom in that this system does support the personnel a lot more. So I think it is really difficult to question the physicality aspect in comparison to Xavi to Hansi Flick. And I would add on the Monaco game too, that any team in world football that has to defend with 10 men for 90 minutes, like they're going to look gassed. Like I'm not surprised by that. And to that point, my only concern now is against Villarreal, to your point, like how are they going to recover? And I think Dom is almost there, but Deb, you and I are over 30. And I find that over 30, recovery is the biggest issue, not actually getting hurt. Like I do work enough in the gym where I stay healthy. I also don't I'm not a professional footballer. I just run around a little bit in cleats. And so recovering is what's difficult. So I'm more interested to see what the team's look like against Villarreal as a test. Maybe it's just rumors, but we have seen that Pedri over the summer did change his training regiment. So once Hansi Flick came in, one of his whoever's went to the Canary Islands for the 4.5 days that Pedri had vacation, whatever it was, and they worked out and they tried to change the way that he was preparing physically for things. So it might not even be a whole team, right? Because I've never accused Rafinha, regardless of the coach, for not having the lungs to press and work hard to that point. So there are players who, like Castado under Rafa Marquez, is, I think, a very similar player in terms of the lungs that we expect him to have. Kubarsi is a similar player. Lamine Yamal, as long as he is healthy, looks to be the same player, right? Lewandowski looks a bit better, honestly. Like Lewandowski, it's more pressing from him, and Lewandowski does look healthier. But again, that was independent from Barcelona when he, at the Euros, said that, hey, I finally feel healthy again for the first time since basically the World Cup. And he admitted that, which I think is important for us to take note of. And I think you are seeing that around the margin. Now, the minute that Lewandowski can't press and looks like he's struggling and looks like he's 36 years old, obviously the hounds of war will come for him. But for now, I'm optimistic that maybe Lewandowski does look a little healthier. And I think we do need to take the physicality of it as a case-by-case basis. And I'm interested to see, with all the players injured, because do we blame Hansi Flick for that? Some of them, like Gabi, his ACL wasn't on Hansi Flick. De Jong's ankle wasn't on Hansi Flick. Ronald Araujo's hamstring injury isn't on Hansi Flick, right? So it's like a lot of the injuries that are piling up. Barcelona is still as unhealthy as they have been under Xavi, and the excuses are that the squad is not deep enough because financially they're in trouble, right? And so those problems haven't been solved. So to the point, Dev, I also would take a step back and say, we're not ready for that physicality referendum. Talk to me in the spring when there is knockout Champions League stuff. That is the final point here that I'm very tentative about. I saw a lot of people that I respect and trust on social media say Barcelona still did not have the physicality required for the Champions League. And after one match that they defended for 90 minutes with one man down, I'm not prepared to make some kind of sweeping claim that Barcelona is still unprepared in the Champions League.
Hopefully, what you said, Dan, is true, that there are changes because we need those changes. So hopefully that's happening. Because if it happens, that's good for all of us.
When it comes to the physicality and the fitness, it's tough not to talk about Dani Olmo. Now, of course, we have discussed Dani Olmo a lot on our podcast, on Dan's podcast. So he is a topic that everyone knows about and everyone talks about. But I would like to hear your thoughts, Dan, now that you have seen Olmo play a bit longer, and especially that we have seen now Barca without Olmo, how that looks. You alluded to this earlier when you said, okay, Barca without Dani Olmo looks much different. And we did look much worse for that matter as well. So how do you see his role evolving as we go deeper into the season, maybe with Frankie coming back, Gavi coming back? Does Olmo retain that spot in the team, or does he become more of a luxury sub?
For better or worse, I think injuries are going to take a lot of those questions. It's same thing with the center back stuff. Oh, what happens when Araujo comes back? Okay, there's a lot of ifs on those statements. The idea that De Jong is going to come back healthy and stay healthy. The idea that Gabi is going to come back healthy and stay healthy. The idea that Pedri is going to stay healthy. And there's a reason why Marc Castado, after we got really excited about Marc Bernal for 2 weeks, why Marc Castado is now the consummate in-pen starter until further notice, until Gabi or De Jong is able to come back. And even for Gabi, we're still talking about one more month and maybe another month and a half after that. So that's a player that I have faith that if there's one player on that squad that is going to come back from an ACL injury and look like himself, it's Gabi. And if there's one guy I'm excited for in Hansi Flick's system, it's Gabi. I'm very excited to see that, but I'm also very tentative that if he doesn't look himself, everybody relax, because I know ACL injuries, we don't fear them the way we did even 6, 7, 8 years ago. Medicine is getting better and improving. We know more about those, but he's also a player that with an ACL injury is going to need a little bit of time to return to his best. So let's take a chill pill on that. And to that point, Dom, I think with the new Champions League adding 2 more matches and these players playing so many matches, it's not really a luxury idea. We always view the squad as who's the starting 11 in the Champions League final or against Real Madrid or whatever it is. But like I had said on my match review after Monaco, or maybe before that, maybe we talked about it, Dom. I don't know. There's too much content. I can't keep my brain straight. But I would say like the Bayern Munich and Real Madrid, that's the same week. So what I had said was I would start Dani Olmo against Bayern Munich because I think he supports that game more than he does the Real Madrid game. I would go Pedri, De Jong, Gabi against Real Madrid, and I would go Dani Olmo, Gabi, Pedri, or whoever is healthy of that trio. But like Dani Olmo at this point, he's unknown whether or not he's going to be back by the time that Barca are facing Bayern Munich against Real Madrid. He might be back the week before, which is great, but he also might come back the week after because the reports are that they won't push him. And that's still 4 weeks away or whatever it is, but still. So I think for Dani Olmo, what I'll say is I put him on equal footing as Pedri and De Jong and Gabi as players that really help this team when he's on the field to start. I think that the Dani Olmo that I would watch against RB Leipzig had too much work to do. Like we are seeing against a low block, Dani Olmo was just so useful. And because Lamine Yamal does require that double team, that second defender to slide so often, Dani Olmo is finding space in the middle of the field that he would have to really work for and fight for RB Leipzig. So the idea that he can be more of a goal scorer this season and more of a goal threat is exciting. Like I am seeing a really good version of Dani Olmo, and being 26, he's still a player, not necessarily improving, but I think we're underestimating that he is a player in his prime or entering in his prime even. So I am very optimistic with Dani Olmo. If anything, his start at Barcelona has been better than I even anticipated, and that has been really exciting to watch.
I think we often blame our sports institution as they're useless and clueless and know nothing. But I think on this one, they probably got it right to a large extent, because if they had just about whatever money that they had and they had to take a bet and they spent that money, if you think about his ability to combine with the profiles that we have, which is basically Rafinha, Pedri from that deeper LCM role, or Lamine and Lewandowski. These are the 4 players he's mostly combining with in that zone 14 area where he's drifting in. I think they're very combinatory. Each one affects the other's game to a large extent, and they can read it off a lot better. So I think from a profile perspective, they complement each other very well. And that's working. That's working very well. So when he does play, Barcelona does look a lot more fluent, a lot more incisive, a lot more able to break through those low blocks or what have you, and creating those attacking threats that are necessary. Hopefully for us, he stays fit, because in this new format, as Dan pointed, we don't really know how many points you need. Some people are saying 16, some people 17. But the point is, you don't go down to Europa at all, right? You either are there or you're not there. And even if you're not there by the time the first 8 go through, you still have those playoffs that will happen. And there again, you have an opportunity to make it through. So one never doesn't really know what this format will bring until we play the format. So I think we have time on our spectrum when we think about Champions League. When we think about La Liga, generally is never decided by December. It goes from February till the end. That's the run. So hopefully, if we get the players back on time, that will give Flick the ability to rest these players a lot more. Hopefully, that will allow them to be fitter for a longer period of time and be available for the right games that are required. Because when he's available and he can be played, I think he will make Barca better for the way Flick wants to play. And from that point of view, my take would be, Dom, that they got it right with him. Given they only had $5 to spend, they decided that they're going to spend the $5 on this particular individual. And on this one, they got it right.
They did, yeah. He seems to be the exact profile that this Flex Barca needs. And that's all there is to say about that signing, is that the system actually enhances the player that he is. So you get Dani Olmo, but you get like an improved version of Dani Olmo, Dani Olmo 0.2, for example, because he does what he normally does, but only to a much, much higher standard, which is what we need. And then he can be the goal scorer for this team as well, which we have seen. And we have spoken about this a lot, Dev. he does need to iron out some things, how he shoots, where he shoots from, all those things. And then he can be a consistent goal scorer. But he also has to stay fit. That's the main thing. As long as Olmo is fit, he will influence Barca in a good way, I believe, especially if this setup and this style of play continues. I think he will be a key role for Barca. Now, injuries, obviously, a huge problem, especially when you do play across 3 competitions and you have a thin squad as it is. This would be a massive blow for Barca if they keep losing him, keep losing Pedri, and keep losing all these players that are injury prone on paper. Now, this is where the whole physicality thing comes in. Okay, can Flick actually improve the fitness of these players? Maybe he can. If he does put a lot of emphasis on that, maybe there is a world in which Barca become a much fitter team, team that is much healthier for a longer period of time. But we can't say that because we don't have the access and information that we would need to make such a statement at this point in the season.
And with that, gentlemen, the last topic of the day, which is Villarreal. Barca go to play Villarreal away and last round, and it's never easy to play them. What's the best way for Barca to set up? Number one. Number two, is there an upset on the cards?
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
I wouldn't call it upset either way. I think this is like a 50-50. I think Barcelona had been in the best form to start the year, but as far as watching the matches, Villarreal had been like number 2 in terms of like aesthetically what we're seeing. I think it's a 50-50, especially on the road against Marcelino, who plays Barcelona well. I'm trying to be optimistic that there'll be a good result, but I will say that after Monaco, that I'm not trying to make an excuse for Barcelona, but if they are going to drop a game in the Liga, their first game in the Liga this season, they've been perfect to start. So if they're going to drop a game, it's probably going to be this one, to be honest with you, because of the short turnaround, having played 90 minutes a man down against Monaco and all those things. But there's another side of me that obviously watches these matches and wants to be optimistic. And so there's a part of me that's, they beat Villarreal 4-1 on the road, and my Fernandez cousins got a run out. Hopefully they make the game. I didn't see the squad list yet, so by the time this goes out, it probably is out. But yeah, if Guillermo and Tony Fernandez again get to the bench, and then we get more Ansu Fati. Ansu Fati gets a goal in his return. We get the first team debuts of Tony Fernandez and Guillermo. So yeah, there is this world where I am like a pig in slop when this match ends and Barcelona won 4-1 or whatever. So it's possible, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this game is going to be like, if they win, it'll be 2-1 or it'll be a fight. And I think goals are going to be coming in this match. I think both these teams leave holes for goals to be scored. And yeah, I think it'll be hopefully a good match. And hopefully Barcelona has that response, because I think that's the other part of it too, the intangibles. We haven't seen, because it was the first loss for Hansi Flick, we haven't seen what the response looked like. I think that was something I did criticize Xavi about. And I criticized many managers from Barcelona in recent times, that what does your team look like when there is hell to pay? Excuse my language there. But yeah, like when we've been punched in the mouth, how do we respond as a team? So under Hansi Flick, his Bayern Munich sides did give up goals. They did lose a few matches that Bayern fans got angry about, but then they responded in such a way that they won trophies, and they did winning under Hansi Flick. So I'm hoping that Barcelona can figure out how to replicate that and say, all right, this is what it looks like when we get punched in the mouth, and show the resiliency and come out and put that match behind them. Because to that point about the starting 11, Dom, I only see one option. I think that with Ferran Torres out, it has to be the same 11 that started against Monaco. There's no other option. I know people are going to say Pablo Torre, but immediately the immediate response becomes, all right, Eric Garcia made a mistake. I don't trust him anymore. And now I automatically trust the players who are on the bench more. So we have to start Pau Victor and start Rafinha as they can, because Eric Garcia made a mistake or isn't the pivot that we need in that situation. And then immediately the guys who didn't play are the ones who were going to be the solutions. And I don't necessarily know if that's the case. It's not disparaging Pau Victor or Pablo Torre. I just think that, Eric Garcia against Villarreal is still enough of a solution. That is what Hansi Flick is going to trust.
We don't have the luxury of actually, tweaking the personnel that much, right? We don't really have many other options. And our other options that we do have, I don't think they necessarily they don't offer us solutions that would break the game completely and turn the tides in our favor completely. So I think that, yes, to your point, the setup will probably remain the same. My only thought would be, don't play Villarreal, right? If we do play a lot of back and forth, if we do play a tennis match, if we do play this highly vertical end-to-end football, I don't think we win that fight. It's always the same thing. You play to the other team's strengths, you're probably going to get burned, right? So that would be my thought. So is Flick going to stay true to what we have seen so far and be very vertical in the first line, then try and control the game in the second phase and try and pin down Villarreal and actually play to our strengths? Or is he going to revert back to what we've seen in seasons past, where we would just play the game that our opponent wants to play? And that is, in this case, would be a very end-to-end affair with lots of space being open and exploited, lots of long balls, lots of direct play. I don't want to see that, because in that game, our chances of actually losing that game or being or upset happening are much, much higher. So if we do say that Barca losing is an upset, even though to Dan's point, it probably is not. If we do say that's the condition, like Barca lose, that's an upset, I think, yeah, there is a chance. There is a chance, but I will still go for Barcelona. If we do play our game, if we do play to our strengths, we can still win, and I think we will concede most likely. So I would still go for a 3-1 maybe, or a 3-2. Even if it becomes that open, I would say that there will be goals definitely, but I think we can score 3 past Villarreal. And then if we do keep our brain force to a minimum, we concede 1 goal maybe, and then still win the game.
I have been seeing calls in my audience for Pau Prim. I watch Pau Prim now at Barca Athletic because they're on Barca 1, so that's been much more convenient. Pau Prim is having a good start to this season. Last year was a bit of a lost season for him. He was jumping between the U19s and Barca Athletic, and he just didn't really find his footing. So he wasn't going in the direction you would have wanted, but he has been the pivot so far for Barca Athletic, and he has looked good. And so he's looked good there, and that's fun. It's the same thing with Marc Castro. Like last season, he looked good with Barca Athletic. So I don't think Pau Prim is ready to jump for the first team immediately with that need, but I think he's back on track, if that makes sense.
To your point, Dom, I think I'll stick to what Dan said. If we get that Ansu Fati goal, and if we get the Fernandez brothers a run out, and if we get some new kids playing in, I think that's great. That will be a good thing to talk about. That'll be something to look forward to. From the score perspective, my practical side says that we can lose 2-1. But knowing, being a Barca fan, I'll go with the, okay, we're winning 2-1. But in my head, I do think that there is a fair chance that we might not win this one as well on the road, given all the other context.
There's breaking news. The Fernandez brothers will be on the bench. I only know that because the Barca Athletic squad list came out and those two were not on it. So I expect them to still be on the first team.
There are benefits of waking me up early, guys. And yeah, that's one of the life's biggest lessons. But there you have it. I think this is a good place to close this episode. Everyone who's watching, you asked for Dan. We got Dan. And again, huge thank you to you, Dan, for joining us again and making this episode that much more lively and interactive. To everyone watching as well, please make sure to check out Dan's channel, the Barcelona Podcast. It's one of the best Barca content, apart from ours, of course, out there that exists in the Barca timeline. So please do give him a follow and support his work.
So the YouTube channel finally hit 20,000 subscribers after way too many years. Slow and steady wins the race. But what that means is that if you do subscribe on YouTube, there is a special 20,000 subscriber video that I've worked for I'm going to say almost like a few months now on, weeks and months. Because again, it happened so slowly that I had time to prepare for it. But so I do have that. So if you do subscribe, I do have a video, like a special fun video coming out on the channel in the next few days or weeks. If they lose to Villarreal, I might just throw it out there to some positivity.
Make this guy 25, take him to 30. He deserves.
At 100, I promise I'll walk away. So if you hear too much from me, give me 100 and then I'll get that YouTube button and then I'll go home.
Guys, we also have made huge changes to our own blog, and our YouTube channel is getting more content as well on a weekly basis. So do make sure to check out our content as well. It would be nice. Big thanks to Dev as well for joining us and helping me collaborate all of this. And thank you to all of you guys who are watching and supporting us. Make sure to follow this channel. Make sure to follow our blog and our podcast as well. And, as always, as we always say, stay safe and Visca el Barça.